Oké, het is 2 uur. We gaan lekker van start. Welkom bij het webinar van Sabio. We gaan het vandaag hebben over hoe je je kansen voor verbetering in de customer journey effectief via AI automation kan oplossen. We gaan dit doen in het Nederlands en in het Engels. Ik wil jullie eerst even voorstellen aan de deelnemers van vandaag. Allereerst Phil Jordan van HomeServe. Dat is een klant van ons uit Engeland. Die gaat vandaag wat vertellen over hoe zijn customer journey is verbeterd in samenwerking met Sabio. Daarnaast hebben we hier Wouter Bakker, onze country manager hier van Sabio. Via de camera zien jullie ook Rutger Huge, solutions architect. Zelf ben ik Alex Serrades, ik ben business consultant bij Sabio. En we gaan vandaag eerst beginnen met Phil. Hi Phil, hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Yep. Hi guys.
Okay, very good. We're gonna switch to English now because that's also easier for Phil, of course. So welcome everybody, also who is listening maybe in English. Phil will take over the presentation right now, and he will can start with his story. And if you have any questions for him, please feel free to put it in the chat and ask the questions through the panel. And I'll keep that in sight and ask the questions to Phil while he goes along. All right, Phil.
Yeah.
I give you the rights to take over.
So excellent. Can you guys see my screen and hear me clearly? Perfect.
Yes, I can hear you and see it.
So my name is Phil Jordan, and I'm the head of contact channel automation and digital self-service for HomeServe. And I've been invited here today to talk to you about an initiative that we started a couple of years ago with Sabio, which is looking at voice robotics within our contact centers using Google Dialogflow. I've been invited today to share the story that we've been on, a bit about HomeServe and who we are, and also just how we got to this point and the evolution that we've been on over the years to get to the stage in which we are today. I've also got a clip to play for you for of Hannah handling a customer call. So Hannah is HomeServe's automated natural assistant. So I'll get into it first, starting with who HomeServe are. HomeServe are one of the UK's leading home assistance providers. We're also based across Europe in France and Spain, and we have a big territory in the USA as well. But our role is to provide home repair insurance and one-off repairs for things like plumbing, drainage, gas, electrical, pest and security issues in and around the home. We have our own fleet of engineers, so we have plumbers and drainage engineers that work for us, and also we own our own contact centers. So we are responsible for every aspect of the customer journey for when a customer has an issue in their home. I think it's fair to say that your home is probably one of the most important assets that you own. So having that efficient, reliable service is essential to making sure that customers get that peace of mind and see the value in the products which we sell to them. So what was the challenge? I think it's so why did we start looking at things like voice robotics and AI in the first place? I don't think the challenges that we were facing are unique to HomeServe in any way. Around 90 to 95% of our customer contacts were coming in via the telephony channel, and this was despite having a relatively mature digital offering. But the products that we sell, so when a customer experiences an issue in the home and they want to tell us about it to get that engineer to come and visit, don't really lend themselves well to a digital interaction or an app interaction. It's a product that you potentially only interact with maybe once or twice, even 3 times a year maximum. And when you do want to contact us, it tends to be about telling us about a problem. So around 1/3 of our call volume is related to customers wishing to make a new claim. This led to us struggling with consistent levels of service. There's a lot of influencing factors, external influences that can lead to customers wanting to contact us. Things like weather events, seasonality, the sort of time of day and day of the week where customers want to get those sort of maintenance jobs like tap fixes and toilets unblocked and so on done. So we end up with these peaks and troughs of service level. So this is where we started investigating what we could do, what sort of technology could we use to start to flatten out those peaks, and eventually look that led us on to the full automation of claims in the end. So as you can see, it was a long evolution to get to this point of this full automation, but we'd started in 2016 with an application that we call PopServe, and essentially that's our IDV, identification and verification application. So What that does is it allows a customer in the IVR to enter some contact or customer details, so their policy number or their postcode, for example, and it gives us the ability to pop to an agent who that customer is and what policy they hold with us, meaning that they don't have to do those data protection checks up front, but also they can take control of that conversation and open it a bit cleaner. So instead of saying, "How can I help you today?" they can say, "Good morning, Mr. Jordan. How can I help you today?" And it sort of cuts across that conversation. It started saving around 20 to 30 seconds of AHT within our contact centers. But not wanting to stop there, we started looking at, now we can identify what policy the customer has. How could we use that information to offer them a more personalized journey within our menus? I think a lot of businesses out there still have the sort of press 1 for this, press 2 for that IVR menu structures, where you're offering that customer those choices and asking them to select from one. Intelligent call routing was the next application that we introduced in 2017, allowed us to use those data points, such as if the customer was in their renewal cycle or if they had an existing claim with us already, and start to ask those personalized questions, such as, "I can see you have an existing claim, would you like to talk about this?" where the customer can then answer yes or no, rather than having to select the problem out of the menu we're offering them. The next, as we could now identify who that customer was and we had a better idea of the reasons why they were calling, we started looking at IVR automation. So this was using nuanced technology, and it was very directed dialogue. So we would ask a number of questions in order to try and diagnose what problem the customer was experiencing, but only focusing on a really small range of our product set. So only looking at plumbing and drainage problems in and around the home. So where a customer had blockages or leaks within the home, we'd ask the question, is it a blockage or is it a leak? It's a leak. Is it inside or outside the home? It's inside the home. Is it causing severe damage? Yes or no? Yes, it is. No, it's not. We immediately found the limitations with this technology as it was taking around 15 to 20 questions to get a customer all the way through that journey in around 6.5 minutes. Also, we weren't allowing ourselves the opportunity to broaden the range of reasons why customers were calling us. We had to isolate and be quite suggestive as to what the customer could and couldn't claim for, rather than offering every single problem that a customer could experience in the front end. And that's where we started investigating natural language with Sabio. We did a proof of concept with them to get under the skin of what could natural language offer us in terms of that personalization and that full diagnosis of a problem within a customer's home. So we started with a hypothesis. My background is science. I've come from a chemistry background, so I always start the things I do with a hypothesis. It means that we stay focused on what we're trying to use this technology for and what we're trying to prove. And the hypothesis we chose within HomeServe was, using conversational AI, we will be able to determine to a deep level what problem the customer is experiencing and the resolution required. So we stayed laser focused on could we identify a problem within a customer's home down to a level in which we could consume that information. So down to what we call a feature and a fault code within our system. And that is a code that the system consumes, and it makes a decision at that point to say, is the customer covered for the problem that they're describing? And also, is the engineer, what engineer is required to fix the issue as well? With that, we only need a bit of extra information to get the customer back up and running. So a date and time that they want us to come and fix it, and also some contact details. And we now have all the information we need to start to identify what problem the customer is experiencing and fix that for them and roll that back without the need of speaking to a human being. So where do we begin? And I think this is probably singly the biggest question I get asked. So when I've demoed this to other businesses in the past, and I've shown people internally, that they ask me the question, how do we start doing this? How do we begin doing it? You've selected your technology and you've selected your partner. We're using natural language processing with Google Dialogflow, and we're working with Sabio to deliver this. We all know that NLP has the power to deliver benefit across both the customers and the businesses, but when it's built correctly. So we had to first identify what do customers want to talk to us about. I think it's really important that when you use natural language, you use it what it's intended for, which is understanding the natural language of your customer base. This isn't a menu, it's not an IVR, it's not a replacement of your IVR system. It's a means to start to transact with your customers in a robotic fashion. So what we did was we started by asking on a very small but representative proportion of our call volume, just a simple question, which was, in a few words, please say how we can help you today. We asked that question, and all we did was then pass it on to our standard menu. But we started listening to the way the customers were describing their problems, and instead of describing it down to the traditional level that we had done previously, which is a customer saying they want to talk about a sale or retention or make a claim or so on, we started getting varying levels of descriptions of problems and transactions. So instead of looking at a departmental level now, we were looking at a transactional level. So instead of customer service interactions, we were seeing customers describe changing of bank details or updating their address. And instead of claims calls, we ended up having customers describe leaking sinks and blocked toilets to us. Which led us on to then, how do we start to utilize this technology to get what we wanted? So against that hypothesis of trying to identify to a deep level the problem that the customer is experiencing and what engineers require to fix it, we started asking more and more questions to say, can we get down to that code level? And this, in a very simplified format, is what it looks like. This is how we built this in the end. So instead of looking at whether it's a gas engineer or a drainage engineer, we started having customers come through and describe problems such as, I have a blockage or I have a leak. In this case, the one I'm showing you right now is we have a customer describing that they have a blockage. Now, there's many different types of blockages that we cover, and at the end, that's covered by a code. So as you can see, we've got blocked baths, toilets, sinks, drains, and so on, inside and outside, upstairs and downstairs. These are the kind of system codes that the system needs to start consuming in order for us to make that coverage decision and that engineer decision. So in the event a customer comes through and we ask that question, okay, can you please tell me what is blocked, off the back of it hitting that intent of blockage, a customer can say a bath or a sink, in which case we have enough information at this point in time to roll that van. We know that it's a plumber and we know that it's a blocked sink or a bath, so we don't need any more information, don't need to ask any more questions at that point. In the event they say something like a toilet or a drain, we need a bit more information. We don't yet have enough information for the system to consume that and start to have a look at rolling that van. So this is where we ask the question, is it upstairs or downstairs in the event of a toilet? Because an upstairs blocked toilet is a plumber and a downstairs blocked toilet is a drainage engineer. Inside or outside the home in the event of a blocked drain, because inside is a plumber and outside is a drainage engineer. So once we've asked all those questions and we've got it down to that really granular level within a couple of questions compared to the 15 to 20 we were asking previously, we now have enough information we need to start rolling that van and take it forward. But I think enough of me telling you how this thing is built. It's probably best that you guys hear it for yourself, and I'll then give you a quick explanation of what's going on in the background.
We can get you to the right place. In a couple of words, please say how we can help you today.
Toilet system needs repairing.
Thank you. Please bear with us whilst we check your policy details. This may take a few seconds. Great, I have found your details. I just need to make sure we have the most up-to-date address details for your policy. The postcode we have for you is CV22. Is this correct?
Yes.
Now let's get an engineer booked. The earliest we can be with you is today before 1 p.m. Shall I book that in for you?
Yes, please.
Thanks. Can the engineer contact you on the number you are calling from today?
Yes.
Okay, please wait while I book that in for you. While I do so, in a few words, tell us about your experience of booking an appointment with us today.
I would say it's first class. Better than I expected, to be quite honest. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your feedback. The appointment for your toilet flush is booked today before 1 p.m. The engineer may arrive at any time during the time slot, and they will call you when they are on the way to your property. Please can you ensure that there is adequate parking and provide any permits if this is required. Thank you for calling HomeServe. Would you like to discuss anything else with us today?
No, that is fine. Thank you very much, Sugar. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
So that's an example of Hannah handling a genuine customer. So that customer raised that claim on that morning. They managed to get that same day appointment that delighted them even further. He was surprised by that. But essentially, that's an example of one of the transactions that we do around 300 to 400 of those a day at the moment with Hannah handling those calls. It's a significant improvement, but it's fair to say that it didn't start like this. I think to go through that journey from start to finish, we had a customer describing an issue, which was they said they had a broken system. So that's a flushing problem here with what we do, and we do cover that and we do fix it. So we could off that just single phrase that that customer described, we were able to assign that system consumable code of a flushing mechanism issue within the system. Off the back of that, we could go away and based on the customer's phone number, we could identify who they were, and at the same time check the coverage and also look at what engineer availability we have for that customer. And that's all happening in the background as we're confirming the postcode and the name back to the customer in that sense. So just to be clear, those bleeps you heard were not Hannah swearing at the customer. It was just redacting the customer information. So we couldn't play that to you. But while that's all happening, we then go on to that next question, which is we need to find out, what time and date they want us to come and visit, which is probably the most complicated part of that journey, because it's a bit of a negotiation as to what suits them, what we can actually offer, and whether that's suitable enough for them in the first date. We started by asking an open question at that point, which was, when would you like the engineer to come? And we saw, after a lot of analysis, we saw that around 80 to 90% of the customers were simply saying today, tomorrow, or as soon as possible. So we changed the journey at that stage to just offer the earliest date to that customer instead of offering them a range of dates or asking them when they'd like to come. Try and break away that negotiation, try and make it as simple as possible. Just a yes or no response. Would you like this? Yes or no. Answer yes, take you through to the next stage where we can capture your contact details or your phone number at that stage, which we already know because we've already identified you off it and we can already see that you're calling on it. So we ask you if you'd like to use that one today. And we just say yes. Now, to let you guys in on a secret, we asked the question at the end, which is, what did you think of that process? Now, that was a question that we added very deliberately, because when you start to get into voice robotics, I always say actually landing automation is just the beginning of your problems. I think it's fair to say. And what we identified at that point is all this information we were collecting, which was who the customer was, their coverage decision, what date and time they wanted, and their contact details. When we went to load that back into the system, it was taking about 8 or 9 seconds for that to actually get loaded in and return the information back to us to say that that's all gone through and everything's fine. And we were seeing Dialogflow time out in that period of time, because with robotics you don't have the advantages of those buffering screens or those that sort of latency period that you can wait while you sort of have where an agent would have a conversation about the weather outside and all those kind of things. We have to be really instant in our responses. So we've had to add this question in at the back end. We get some great verbatim feedback from our customers, but we've had to do it deliberately in order to deal with this latency problem. But I think it's fair to say that journey, that slick journey that took less than 2 minutes to raise that claim on behalf of that customer, is about 1.5 years worth of continual improvement. So just going through and identifying any of those sort of dropouts, those mistranscriptions, those API errors, and those system latency challenges. They're all highlighted as problems to solve, which the team then jump on and we focus on and we identify and fix going forward. But that's what the customer thinks of the process, and that's what they interact with. But what does it mean for HomeServe, and what's the benefit for us? Well, now we can see there's around 1 in 5 of our new claims are now being handled entirely robotically. So Hannah is handling 20% of all of our new claims bookings. 1 in 4 of our new boiler service bookings. So we also offer the ability for an engineer to come out and repair and check on a boiler. So we offer that service as well. And 1 in 4 of those are now being booked by Hannah in a completely robotic way. And around 7% of our in-flight claims call volume as well is being completely deflected and handled by Hannah, either via an engineer status update or cancelling or rescheduling the appointment on behalf of the customer. She's now consuming around 13% of HomeServe's total claims call volume, which is worth around £1.5 million to our contact centre annually. So there's a significant amount of workload being reduced, which it changes the mindset of the way, because a lot of the questions we get asked is about the agent experience and so on that follows, but it changes the way that the agent is now handling their phone calls. We're now taking a lot of those simple emotionless transactions out the contact center, and what the agents are being left with is the more complicated and potentially emotive conversations. So what we're having a look at now is with the operations in hand in hand with the operation is, if we're taking those out, then maybe there should be less focus on things like average handling time, for example, and maybe more focus on actual customer outcomes instead, because they are just receiving the complicated calls moving forward. So that's what it means to HomeServe, but what do our customers think of it? And this is all on the screen. You can see now genuine customer feedback. For every claim that we raise via Hannah, we send out a survey which says, what did you think of that? In the same way we do if it's raised via an agent or if it's raised via the web as well. And we get verbatim feedback that comes back to us. One of the biggest points raised when we said that we wanted to automate our claims conversations was, will customers actually want to use this? We have quite an elderly demographic. But I think it's fair to say, as you sort of embark upon these AI journeys, it's talking about no matter what sort of age or situation your customer's in, you're trying to make this technology work for every single one of your customers, and that is by identifying those dropout points. If a customer is struggling, then you need to make sure you're escalating that to an agent, but then it's identifying the reasons why they're struggling and fixing forwards. It's something that is going to continually evolve, and you're never going to stop building when you finally get into this. I'll read out a couple of those statements that customers have mentioned in there. And I think there's someone that said, I gave you the highest scores because your automated service is second to none. And someone's also written, incredibly efficient, easy to arrange, and perhaps even easier than a human one-to-one contact. But my personal favorite is the one in this top right corner up here, which is probably the easiest and least annoying automatic booking system I've ever used. I think I like that one because it's testament to what customers think when they get on the phone to a robot. They immediately think it's going to fail. They immediately think it's going to be a challenge, and they think it's not going to work to them. But I think to be described as the least annoying of something is an achievement in itself, because the most we should be is probably passive, I think. When you're trying to develop these customer-facing processes, trying to make it as simple and as slick and as passive as possible is what you're aiming to do. We're not ever going to automate that agent experience, but this booking process, these transactions which are getting customers way up front, it's what we're aiming to do, and try and do it not as annoying as possible, I think it's fair to say. But that's everything from me. Thank you for listening to me ramble on. Happy to
thanks Bill. Very inspiring story. Of course, I've talked to you about this before, but also the examples, and was really wondering like how would customers react as well. And then when to see all those comments, and also in the clip itself, you hear how surprised and enthusiastic the person is. Like, oh, this went really good. And was really
it takes around 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to complete those claims, where it's about 7.5, 8 minutes, depending on waiting times as well within the contact center. If all we want to do is just complete those simple transactions, it just sort of takes that effort away from that customer. If you can do it slick, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I know there's people who are looking at this and maybe have some questions. So far, I have not seen any questions coming from the people, but if you are viewing this, there is an open chat, so you're able to send the question in to Phil and to us as well, of course. Wouter, I saw you writing along. Did you have any questions for Phil that you were thinking about?
Yeah, I've basically got 2 initial questions for you, Phil. So one of them is basically, how do you determine which calls you have handled by HANA and which calls go into the traditional contact center?
So which ones do we target? Is that what we're saying? Yeah. So yeah, there's 2 ways to do it. I think we want to look at things that, like I said, are simple and repetitive. I think when people talk about sort of looking at robotics, they tend to go first to things like, they talk about customer service interactions, things like how do I get rid of my customer service interactions? I think with that, your customer service interactions are normally made up of probably 15 to 20 different transactions, so probably relatively low volume, not high complexity, but trying to target where you're going to get that sort of high volume repetitive transaction, which is when it came to what we were doing. I've always been a process expert. My background is process engineering more than it is robotics. Where it came to it, we were looking for those processes which had simple steps to it. So within this one, we had to identify what problem the customer experienced. We had to identify who they were, what date and time they wanted, and contact details. It's a 4-step process that our agents are currently doing on a daily basis, and all they're doing is filling out that form on behalf of our customers. It's one of our highest volume processes, so that's why we targeted that in the first instance. The complexity comes within how do I diagnose the problem, which is where the natural language processing technology almost comes into its own. That's where we had to evolve to using natural language because of the range and variation within the problems a customer is experiencing. The natural language processing is where we focus. But I think how we determine then which ones are raised robotically versus which ones are raised via an agent. we have a flag that goes into it. So every time a claim is raised via HANA, it goes down as HANA user within our systems, and we can count on a daily basis to say, this is how many were raised by a contact center user, this is how many raised by a HANA user, and also we have the flag for digital user, which I own as well. So I'm focused entirely on self-service as a KPI within HomeServe.
Okay, and do you have a way to capture the intent of the person calling you to basically say, we make the decision, this call goes into HANA and this call goes into a real agent?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so we do that. So we make a decision about where we can fulfill that transaction end to end. We will pass it into HANA. Where we have, we also use HANA for the routing aspect as well. So where it then routes to an agent. So if a customer comes through and they say, I want to cancel my policy, for example, we'll pick up the intent of cancel policy, which is one that we have. We have around 250 different intents that sit at the top. So rather than those sort of 5 to 6 IVR menu options that people tend to have within their contact centers, we have around 250 different endpoints, which a customer can say anything ranging from, I want to buy a policy, I want to change my bank details, I want to renew my policy, or I want to go down one of those claims routes. Where we can automate something, we'll pass it through HANA. Where we can't, we'll have HANA escalate that to an agent with then context being passed forward. So one of the big use cases and benefits we've had off the back of it is we've started adding to each of those unique endpoints where we've identified what the customer wants to talk about, a whisper that whispers in the agent's ear. So not only do they get the screen pop telling them who's calling, but they also get a whisper which tells them what they're calling about. With the agent then, we've provided them with a script. So instead of saying, good morning, Mr. Jordan, how can I help you today? We can say, good morning, Mr. Jordan, I understand that you have a blocked train. Let's get you back up and running. And we've saved another 20 to 30 seconds of AHT just by providing them with the context that we're capturing within natural language.
Great. And the other question I'm having, Phil, you're dealing with the Dutch people now, so you showed a lot of very positive client feedback, but I can imagine that sometimes automated interaction also goes terribly wrong. Are there also examples where it goes wrong, and what do you do to make sure that the resulting customer experience is going to be positive?
So with every piece of technology, there will always be system issues, latency problems, reasons to escalate that call out. I mean, we're fortunate in this environment where we're on the phone, where we can escalate things out to an agent if needs be. So we've had to put a lot of guardrails in place up front when we first started doing this, which is why we isolated it to a really small population of call volume to begin with. We overlaid it in there, we started asking these questions, and we started routing to agents. We've put in a lot of technical guardrails to say if, I don't know, our APIs go down or if our back-end systems go down and so on, the output is always just escalate to an agent. Doesn't matter which one, just escalate to an agent so the customer continues to have that conversation. I think one of the earliest things you need to get done when you deliver these programs is making sure no one can get trapped in it, because that has happened, and we've gone through that process of repudiating that customer and making sure that they got a good outcome from it and so on. But we've had scenarios very, very early on in this program of work where customers were getting trapped in loops where they were asking the same question, it was going around. There's all sorts of sort of methods you can use to do so. So we can have things that are built into the back-end fulfillment within Dialogflow, which escalates customers out. You can have it where the same phrase is said more than twice, then you can kick out to agent at that point. It's called a looping escalate, it's what it's called. But then we also have the standard escalation that we have where we don't recognize what the customer is trying to say. They'll say something we don't have logged into one of our intent categories, and we'll say, sorry, can you say that again? If we don't recognize it the second time, again, we just escalate to agent. That is always the outcome. Is we're not here to trap anyone and then to make sure they're automated. We're here to make sure that we build our processes so everyone can use it, get all the way through from start to finish.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So the next part of the webinar was also Q&A. So we're already sort of sliding in through that. But I also want to add Rutger to the conversation. I'm going to try and start sharing the screen. Let's see. Maybe Phil has to change presenter here. So Rutger, you've been listening to this conversation, and now you see the screen. And you as an expert also, you probably get a lot of questions when people want to start this kind of process? How do you explain to people like where to start? Can you give us some more insight on that?
Sure, I think a lot of things are covered by Phil already. So I think where to start is really know where your customer are calling about. So really getting the intent of the customers or the interactions. So basically, if you capture the interactions and you capture the intent of the interactions, you can see which process you can automate. I think you should start at what Phil already said about repeatable transactions. So the easy transaction that are done by agents now, which handle maybe cost a lot of time, but can be automated very easily. Like if you look at a financial company, maybe giving out interest rates or changing addresses or stuff that's easy to automate, or easier to automate. So I think it's best to start with capture the intent of your customers calling.
Okay, yeah, that's also very good. I think in regards maybe for you, Phil, I also got a question about agents. You did say a little bit about the routing, but the fact that the agents are getting more difficult questions, you also mentioned that. And is there anything that you guys have found out now that they've been getting these more difficult questions? How do they deal with this?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we've seen is obviously there's been fluctuations in handling time amongst the agent population because we are starting to pass those more difficult conversations through to the agent. But we're starting to have a look at now how we continue on. It shouldn't really be the scenario where you're looking at almost NLP and automation in isolation. If we're starting to filter calls out and start to capture more information, but then also we're dipping into things like customer profiles and stuff, we should be looking at almost what context we could be passing on to the agent at that point. So if we have identified that this customer has called us today, that the intent that they've captured is they're chasing an engineer, we've checked the engineer status and actually it's after the appointment slot. Is there anything we can do to pass that forward to the agent so they are better equipped to handle that conversation when it lands as well? So it should be an end-to-end. What we want to do is get to the point where we are capturing as much information as we possibly can within the automation bot, and then it's a continuation of a conversation rather than restarting of it when it eventually hits the agent front end as well.
So that shows basically you have benefits from all sides basically because of this system. It gives the customer even a better experience because of the agent.
That's right.
Yes, yeah, thanks. Wouter, I had a question for you too, because I mean, in my role, I see that I have to talk to a lot of different departments within these bigger companies, and I heard Phil saying that he is more of the technical background. What kind of departments do you usually start talking to when you want to implement stuff like this?
Well, I think a key thing, key driver for implementing these kind of technology successfully is basically take small steps. So use an agile way of working. And in agile, the second thing is also enclosed is that you need to basically have, people. You really need to understand your customer journey and what's happening in your decisions on which one to automate and which ones you don't want to automate. And you need to make sure that a voice bot like HANA and HomeServe, it's high maintenance. Yeah. It's not something you can build of it. You need to make sure that you stay on top of it, measure very clearly what your success rates are in capturing the right intents, how you handle these subsequently, and then based on that, make the tweaks, sprints of your agile process to improve it. I think, Phil, you said that basically HANA was basically where you are today is the result of 18 months of basically training and practicing up until the point where it is now, and probably your.
Did you hear that, Phil, or not?
No, sorry, I just missed the end of that. Sorry, go on, take him.
What I said, Phil, is that what I heard in your presentation is that it's actually took 18 months to come to the point where you are now, with, let's say, getting HANA to handle these interactions. but probably that's not the end of it. So there's probably a couple of next steps you're planning for. Can you tell us where you want to go from here?
That's right, and I think it's worth calling out as well that along that 18-month period as well, it's exactly as you described. It was an agile delivery, so probably around 6 months after, or probably less than 6 months, around 4 to 6 months after we kicked off the program in the first place, around 18 months ago, we started doing our first automation. We built upon it as we've gone. So we started on a very small call volume. We then ramped up the call volume, and we were doing around 7%, I think, when we ramped up the call volume. And just by incrementally adding things over the 18-month period, we've gone from that sort of 7% of our claims call volume being automated all the way up to that 20% that we're at now. And it's incremental gains. It's not we've switched this thing on and we're all of a sudden doing 1 in 5 of our claims. We've built it up over a long period of time through that problem-solving exercise. But I think next steps is what we want to start doing is having a look over multiple channels. So what can we do with natural language and voice automation or conversational AI within a digital space? So on our live chat channels, what can we do for things like contextual search on the website as well? But then also passing, like as I've already said, is passing this context that we're now capturing, all this information that we're picking up around customers during this automated conversation. How can we collect that up and pass it forward to the agents so they can start to handle those phone calls in a much more efficient manner as well, but then also in a much more, I suppose, customer satisfactory manner as well. So they are, the customer is well aware, or they're not having to repeat themselves on those agent calls if they've already gone through a HANA interaction. But those are the kind of sort of end-to-ends we're looking at. Additionally, we are always finding new transactions that we can potentially go after and have a go at automating where there's low complexity. We should be having a look at actually how complicated would it be to start taking information out of our systems and putting information back in based on the way the customer is speaking to us. So we're always making those improvements to not only what we've already built, but also trying to find those new opportunities to try and reduce that workload within the contact centers. That anything that gets rid of an interaction entirely or even a part of an interaction is all saving hours within our contact centers. So that means that the agents are there to handle the interactions where the customer needs us most.
That's very interesting stuff. Just to wrap it up, Rutger, I have one more question for you. Is also like if people have been listening to this webinar now for a little over 30 minutes, they got inspired. Like, what kind of tip would you like to give to the people who have been listening for the future, like to start, or maybe also if they're already in this process, like what are the things that they need to look out for?
Well, start with the end in mind, but do not want to start with building the end state. So really start with small steps and try to evolve agile, and not to try to start with a big bang, because probably that will fail and will cause a lot of effort to get things started. So start small, I think, to conclude.
Yeah. You got anything to add to that, Phil, or you happy with the answers the guys are giving here as well?
Okay, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's going in with no preconceptions as to what things you're going to be working on as well. I think you want to be targeted on where your value is within the program you're kicking off, obviously, because you've got to go and find out actually is it possible in the first place to do this. But I think no preconceptions as to how you're going to start building your language model. I think just by asking that open question of your customers, which is, what would you like to talk about today? You'll learn so much about the conversations that your contact center are having on a daily basis just by getting the response to that question. You start to build up massive amounts of MI and information about what customers are calling about, which if used correctly, you can start to really measure the sort of things that your customers want to talk about. So you can start to really identify the way to start transacting with your customers as well, and the amount of information you can start to pass back to your operation and your agent conversations as well about the sort of peaks and troughs in call types that you get at certain points in the day, because you start to have a really wealth of knowledge that comes out of the application itself as well.
Thank you very much. You got more to add, or is the core of the webinar also for you the same?
Well, I think to add to what Rutger was saying about small steps, I think there's basically two things. So first of all, you can think as an organization how you think your customer journey runs, but you need to take a look at how your customer thinks your customer journey runs, because that's where you need to react on, or where your whatever you automate needs to react on. And another thing is you need to start by getting a good sense of what the intent is your customers are reaching out to you. If you cannot capture the intent, then you cannot move forward with the typical first step to
Getting good insights. It's very important.
Okay.
Okay, well, that then concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank you all for listening and watching this. We did it completely in English because Phil was also on the call, of course. So a very thank you to Wouter also, to Rutger, and mostly, of course, to Phil. Thank you for your inspiring story. And yeah, we'll see you hopefully very soon again. And to all the watchers at home, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a good day. Bye.